Welcome to Talkin Shop with ShopSabre. My name is Brandon. I'm going to be the host of this podcast. And in this podcast, we're going to talk about all things related to CNC. We're going to dive into a variety of topics, discussions, tips, tricks, and collaborate with others in the industry, including professionals from our own organization. Hopefully you'll join us. We're going to have a lot of fun in this, but we're also going to hopefully teach you a few things related to the industry. So join us every week. We're going to have a new podcast. Check it out on all your favorite podcast host sites. And let's have a little fun talking about CNC. Welcome back to Talkin Shop with ShopSabre. I'm Brandon. I'm here with Jesse.
Hey, Brandon, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. We're starting off with episode 4. We're going to talk a little bit about CNC plasma. That's exciting.
Awesome. I'm really excited for this topic.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a good topic. I know we talk a lot about routers typically, but let's be honest, we build plasma tables too, and there's a lot about the plasma industry we should talk about as well.
Yeah, we can't forget to include those guys. But Brandon, what's going on with your voice?
Well, apparently I found out this weekend my voice is not louder than race car engines.
How long have you been racing?
Not long enough, apparently, because my voice isn't doing well. Apparently, when you scream for 20 laps straight, your voice goes, loud noises!
I figured the girl screams would be gone with how long you've been doing this.
No, I still scream every lap. Not sure what to do with my hands most of the time.
I heard you won.
I did.
I heard you finish first. Would you drive from the back of the pack, I heard?
Everybody else quit.
Everybody else quit?
Yeah, last one.
Getting out of your way?
Yep.
They want their car ruined.
Yep. Nope. Last one, when you run around in last place, you can't get in the accidents, and then everybody else gets off the track and you win.
What does he tell me all the time? If you can't win the show, be the show?
You can't win the show, be the show. That's the kind of the motto. But yeah, if you're not first, you're last, right? Isn't that what Ricky Bobby says?
Bobby,
right?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
If you ain't first, you're last.
Well, congratulations on your big win this weekend, man.
Hey, thanks. Hopefully I can get my voice back, though, because I know it sounds a little funny right now. So hopefully everybody will still listen to me, even though I'm a little hoarse.
Yeah, we'll make it through this. We'll be all right. Hopefully next week your big boy voice comes back.
Well, that's fair enough. You know, today we're going to talk a little bit about plasma, as we talked about earlier. I'm pretty excited about it. You know, a lot of people, I don't think about all the advantages to plasma, but also the way a machine's built and the technology that goes into plasma. A lot of people think it's plasma. It doesn't really matter. There's not as much going on there, but I think there's just as much going on in that world as there is the router world. And today I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to hit on the metal world because there's a lot of guys who are listening to this show that, still know a lot about the metal and the fabricating world and probably want to know a little bit about that technology. So I think that's where we're going to go today. And we'll kind of just, go through the entire process. And I think we just kick it right off with, what is plasma cutting, right, Jesse?
Yeah, Brandon, it's my turn to read out of the dictionary this week. What is plasma cutting? Plasma cutting is a process that cuts through electrically conductive materials by means of an accelerated jet of hot plasma. Let's unpack that.
Yeah, that's a
mouthful.
That was a lot of dictionary reading there.
Yeah.
With that, like you said, it's conductive materials. Typically the materials that you cut are, steel, stainless steel, aluminum, brass, and copper. Although there are other conductive metals that may be cut, but the reality is that's the majority of them. I mean, let's be honest. The majority of customers you speak with are cutting, steel, stainless steel, or aluminum.
Yeah, it seems to be the typical application.
Yeah, and I think with aluminum, the one thing to touch on there is there's some safety things that people need to take into consideration. There's some gases and whatnot that can be a little bit dangerous if you're not doing it right, which I think we'll touch on a little bit later in the episode. But the other thing to consider is the finishes you get. There's a real world difference between routing certain materials or milling certain materials when you get into metals, and obviously cutting with a plasma. And there is a time and place when you need to use a mill. There's a time and place when maybe a water jet or a laser makes sense, but there's a lot of places that people think they need to spend a lot more money than they need to achieve the quality they're looking for and the parts they're looking for. Would you not agree with that?
Absolutely. I would agree.
Yeah. When we look at this, plasma cutting itself grew out of plasma welding in the 1960s. When you really kind of look at what this is, it emerged as a very productive way to cut, sheet metals and plate. And really that kind of came about in the 1980s.
So this technology's been around for a while.
It has, yeah. I mean, this is really, it's one of those things where it's an advantage over traditional metal against metal cutting. When you start looking at, using a cutter, a rotational cutter like a mill,
right?
It's typically going to be a slower cut process on your sheet metals. It's a slower cut process than what you can get with a flame. And by utilizing the technology that was created, we have a lot of capabilities that we can bring to the end user, and we can do it at a far more effective price range. Back, when you first got into cutting sheet metal and stuff, I mean, your mills are hundreds of thousands of dollars, and most guys don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to cut sheet metal. And let's be honest, if you're going to do this as something in your home garage, you're not putting a mill in your home garage in most cases.
Who has the money to put a mill in your home garage, right?
Right. I mean, and like you said, there are certain people that will do it. And you know what? For you guys that are listening right now who are like, I got a mill in my garage. Well, I'm jealous because I don't have a mill in my garage, and I wish I did. But
I wish I had a plasma machine in my garage.
there's that, right? So the early plasma cutters were large. To be honest with you, they were large machines, somewhat slow and expensive. They didn't have the technology that you have today. Therefore, they were kind of dedicated to repeating processes. Whether you're doing nested applications where you're just doing the same part every day, all day. But fortunately enough, like other tools, CNC technology has kind of, and CNC computer numerically controlled. When that technology came about, it allows us to really incorporate these speeds that are associated with plasma today and, really streamline this. And now you don't have to run production necessarily with a plasma to be productive with it. Nowadays you can use them very versatile. A lot of job shops run these, do they not?
Right, yeah, absolutely. Fab shops for sure, like guys fixing heavy equipment, right? They're not running that thing all the day. I just talked to a guy, so all he does is put teeth on buckets. We got guys doing fire pits too. Those are huge. Get a lot of calls on guys fabbing fire pits. Shooting targets are another really big thing right now. Guys looking for shooting targets are hard to come by. Furniture builders, right? We got a little expertise in this. We made that slab table and we fabbed up a table for it.
I don't know about expertise on that. It took a.
Hey, you stop. That was my project.
I don't know. I mean, I think it took a little bit of trial by fire on that one, if you will.
I think it turned out all right. But yeah, you seeing more stuff in the furniture industry, guys building stuff out of wood and then accenting it with metal stuff.
Absolutely. And I think in relationship to accenting things, the signage industry, there's so many people that use signs, in a printed format or in a routed format, but there's still a world that depends on metal signs, and there's a lot of two-dimensional cut-through signs, and plasma is a really good option for that, being able to create some of that cool stuff. I mean, to be honest with you, we have in my own house, we have some metal signs hanging on our wall that are pretty cool. We had them powder coated, and it's, to be honest with you, the stuff my wife has come up with. And let's be honest, my wife thinks I'm really good at drawing CAD. Hopefully she's not listening right now, but she thinks I'm really good at drawing CAD.
You've been telling her this whole time you make this stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Dude, she sends me these pictures, and then I just copy the picture and I put them right in there, and voila, Brandon's the best person ever with CAD.
I've been here this long and you haven't taught me this yet?
Well, there's certain secrets you keep to your own to make yourself look good. And
I guess.
Now, hopefully, if Amy was listening, this was not true.
You're busted.
No, hopefully she's not listening. If she's listening,
everyone's listening.
Everybody's listening. So, but no, in all seriousness, that's the beauty of this. You don't have to draw everything from scratch. Literally my wife, and I'm not kidding you, that partially was a true story. My wife does send me, stuff, she knows about it obviously, but yeah, she sends me a picture off of the internet that, I think this would be cool. And I can bring that photograph right into the software and we can cut it. And as an example, my father-in-law, he has a garden, and she wanted to make a sign that had, his name on it and his garden, and but it wanted to have a tractor on it. And we, in a matter of minutes, had this sign designed for, her father, and we powder coated it, and it turned out great. It was a present for him, and it's still in the garden today. It's been in there for several years now. And that's the advantage of using a metal sign that's been powder coated, is it lasts. It's a really good method to do things like that, and it was really cost effective.
Right, and then you get the longevity out of that. You're not going to have to replace that for years, if ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of jumps us into our next point of this is, how can plasma help a business, right? That's some cool ideas that we came up with as a family, but let's be honest, how can plasma help a business, Jesse?
Improve safety. You got to keep your employees safe, and this is a much safer way of doing things.
And that's true, because think about it, traditionally you're doing everything by hand. The guys are handling the metal a lot more. The chances of them hurting themselves are quite a bit more, where with the plasma, if you use proper safety protocol, you have, glasses on your guys when they're running the machine so they're not staring at the light. But they're not handling the metal as much. The machine's doing a lot of the movement, it's doing everything there. So once the metal's up on the table, it's really a hands-off process until it's done. Then they pick the parts off, and at that point, it's going into the next process. So you're not having the chance of cutting yourself with the cutting wheels, and there's not as much going on there to, really increase that concern of hurting yourself, especially because we have guys that are cutting expanded metal, and we all know how razor sharp expanded metal can be.
Right.
That's another great area for this. We've got guys that get into corrugated materials as well. Again, not the easiest stuff to handle when you're trying to cut it. So, that's another thing where, like you said, safety is a huge part of this. Plus,
especially,
you don't have...
Especially to a business owner, right? You have a business owner and a guy gets hurt.
Yeah.
That's huge money for you.
Correct, exactly, and that's a great thing is you make it easier on them. It's easier on the body. It's easier on hurting yourself. It's one of those things where you don't have the rotational tools because again the flame's doing all the work. You don't have debris flying everywhere, especially with the efficiency of water tables and downdraft tables, which we'll touch on later in the episode. But another thing I think we need to talk about is not only safety but it improves efficiency. From an efficiency standpoint, Jesse.
It's a lot faster than cutting it out by hand for sure. You get far more efficiency out of the machine. Let it work for you.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And you know what? You get more done with the same amount of time. I mean, when you think about that, your guys are going to be there for 8 hours. You're going to pay them for 8 hours. But in 8 hours, they accomplish a heck of a lot more because the machine can do more in less time.
Right, and we've mentioned this before. You can't outwork this machine. This machine is going to outwork you.
Exactly. And you know what? You might outwork the machine for a small amount of time, but I'm going to promise you, the machine is the long game. It's not going to be tired. Hour 8, it's producing the same amount of parts as it did hour 1. Hour 1, your guy might be really fast, but
by the end of that shift, you're not getting a whole lot done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's going to be pretty tired from...
Well, the machine's back never hurts, right? The machine never gets tired, never gets fatigued.
Correct. Doesn't pinch its fingers.
Right. Never cuts its fingers off.
Doesn't get an owie.
Ouchie.
Ouchie.
I call them ouchies.
Ouchies. No ouchies.
No ouchies.
But, other thing, let's relate it to efficiency. When you're more efficient, you're also more profitable typically.
Right.
It lowers your cost over other applications as well, right? I mean, Jesse, what's your alternative? You're going to go buy
water jet or laser.
Yeah.
That's typically your next option.
Correct. I mean, if you're not going to do it by hand and you're going to buy a piece of equipment, you're really looking at a plasma, a water jet, a laser, maybe a mill.
Maybe. I
think in all scenarios, plasma wins.
Right.
I mean, it's cheaper.
Well, laser jet and water jets are pretty inexpensive, aren't they?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's super cheap, $100,000, right?
I think entry points are like 15 grand to start for tabletop ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's not cheap to get into a solution that's water jet or laser.
Right.
There's also applications, let's be honest, where it's just not necessary. It's not practical. You get into certain things where a water jet, the maintenance that goes into a water jet is significantly more than that of what goes into plasma. The consumable costs that go into a laser are significantly more than what the plasma consumables are. So while you might get a little bit more out of the machine in terms of certain accuracy levels for certain items, you're going to give it up in certain other areas. So if you don't need that accuracy, maybe don't spend the money on that.
Right. Touch back on that maintenance thing. That's one thing we hear a lot on calls is when guys are looking to upgrade from a laser or a water jet, their biggest complaint is always the maintenance. The maintenance is thousands and thousands of dollars, and it is time consuming.
And they make a mess. I mean, plasma tables, don't get me wrong. We're not going to pretend plasma tables are, going to be sitting in the kitchen. They're not the cleanest of tools, right? But you're in a metal shop, so most metal shops have a little bit of a dirty environment to begin with. But they're a heck of a lot cleaner than some of these other, options that you might have. When you look at water jet, I mean, just the cost to have the table pumped out alone. I mean, you have to have somebody come in and do that. You don't do that with the plasma. The plasma, you don't have to have people come in and pump it out. You can clean it yourself, which I'm a hands-on guy. I mean, myself, we touched on it at the beginning. Obviously I'm a race car guy and I like working on cars. I can do my own maintenance. I'm huge on that. I don't want to pay somebody to do something I know how to do or I'm capable of doing. And I think that's the advantage to a plasma is it lets you empower yourself.
Right. And it goes back to kind of what you said. There's a lower cost of doing the maintenance yourself, right? You don't have to have someone come in and pump it out. It's your time. It's your dollar.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, kind of let's jump down. What other advantages really come with this is, the versatility, right?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite parts about the Sidekick is how versatile this thing is. One of my favorite functions is that we can convert this into a combo table.
Yeah, I mean, that versatility is a great one to touch on. And before we get too far into that, let's think about the expansion capabilities even, right? You could start as a plasma table, right? And as you grow the business, let's say, okay, let's put it in a real world scenario here. I know a lot of guys listening are like, well, I don't ever cut wood, right? I don't need to cut wood. I don't need a router. Hold on a second. Just hear me out for a second.
Back that train up.
Yep. Let's put the brakes on a second here. When you look at a plasma shop or a fabrication shop that's going to incorporate plasma, you have a customer that comes to you that's a loyal customer, right?
Yeah.
Joe walks in every day and he's going to tell you, I need you to cut these 1,000,000 parts. Every single year, you're going to sell 1,000,000 parts to Joe.
That's a lot of parts.
Yeah, Joe's awesome.
Joe's going to keep me busy.
Yeah, Joe keeps you busy. But one day, Joe walks into your shop and says, I need you to cut my 1,000,000 parts, but I have these 2,500 plastic parts I need you to cut.
Sorry, Joe. I can't help you.
My plasma doesn't cut plastic.
I don't cut plastic.
Or, well, then I have to put it in my mill. Plastic in a mill, right? Now it's going to gum it up a little bit. The clean-out process is not fun.
Yeah,
so now you
got
to
to
switch over. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. For 2,500 parts, Is Joe's 2,500 parts worth all that hassle?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is that you say, Joe, I appreciate your business. I'll keep cutting the other parts, but I can't get the 2,500 parts done. Let's get those outsourced, right? Let's give them to somebody else. See if somebody else can help you with them. Well, good news. The guy that Joe outsourced to now develops the relationship with Joe over 2,500 parts, and then goes back to him and says, is there any other business that I can help you with? And then...
Is that why my phone's not ringing from Joe anymore?
Yeah, Joe stops calling you because guess what? The new guy...
Can do it all?
He just undercut you because now he bought a plasma table too. And now he's doing his plasma parts and his plastic parts all from the same shop. And Joe's getting a deal because everything's in one spot. And now you just lost 1 million parts because you were not able to do 2,500 parts.
Because I didn't want to cut wood and plastic?
Correct. So the reality is that's where the versatility and the versatile capabilities of a sidekick really come in, is because you don't need it today. You may not need it today. But the expansion capability says that when Joe walks in and says, can you cut those 2,500 parts? You're going to say yes.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to call Jesse right away and you say, Jesse, help.
Yeah.
I told Joe, yes. I don't know what I'm doing. And then
send some work my way. I got you, pal.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're going to sell him
I'm going to make that money.
Yep. And then he's going to help you make money. And then in return, you keep your 1 million parts. And good news, Joe just got a big contract. So now it's 2 million parts next year. And you got it without a question because you said yes.
And he's going to tell all of his friends about me.
Joe has friends as
Joe
well.
has friends.
And then Joe's friends like you.
I'm busy.
See how fast that went?
I love it.
That really escalated, didn't it?
It did. It got a little dramatic.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I feel like I lost Joe.
Yeah. Joe's your friend still. But all in all, I mean, it's an all-in-one tool. Like, that's really what this is meant to be. It's a tool that you can be versatile with. It doesn't matter whether you're cutting aluminum, whether you're cutting stainless steel, whether you're cutting mild steel. It's the same tool you're walking up to. It's just a matter of settings, and you're changing different things. And, there's certain cutters that you can put on the machine and, obviously make different cuts for different thicknesses. But the reality is the machine stays very consistent. And especially from ShopSabre, we build a machine that specifically is designed around the idea that you're going to keep this just like any of our machines a long period of time. This isn't a, 1 or 2 year machine and move on. You're going to keep this for a long time.
10 plus year machine, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, as you get into that, let's touch about that. I said there's a bunch of different cutters on it, right?
Yeah.
So, the number one brand we talk about is Hypertherm.
Hypertherm.
I mean, they're kind of the leader in the industry. Let's be honest with you. There's not many cutters out there that are, ranked above Hypertherm. But
they make a great product.
Yeah, they
really do.
They do. They make a good product. But there are other cutters out there.
Thermodynamics.
That's another one. Thermodynamics. ShopSabre carries that brand as well. That's really the two brands ShopSabre will work with is the Hypertherm and the Thermodynamics, because they are the two leaders in the industry. There's some other brands out there you can get, and you got to be careful because there are some non-CNC capable cutters out there that you can still get machine torches for, and these sales guys will sell you on them like, oh yeah, it's got a machine torch, you're good. Yeah, well, the machine torch doesn't make it CNC ready. You got to remember, you also want to think about the voltage divider boards inside the cutters. You want to make sure, yeah, right? I saw your
My eyes just rolled to the back of my head.
I know, I'm sorry. Voltage divider boards. Okay. What that is that's what controls torch I control. So you want something inside that cutter that knows what the machine is doing, is CNC capable. You want something that is going to help the operator get a better cut. These aren't manual machines anymore. You're not setting the height and then having to adjust them on the fly.
So you're telling me not all torches are created equal?
Not all torches are created equal. And that's really, where I wanted to go with this is all plasma the same if I have the same cutter? Well, the answer is no.
No.
The reality is you can put a Hypertherm Power Max series on a ShopSabre and you can go put it on something else. And you're going to get different cut qualities on the machine.
Yes, you will.
And the reason for it is let's kind of think about that a little bit further, is even though I'm cutting with 45 amps, let's say, right?
Right.
I got a set speed. Hypertherm provides a set of realistically parameters is what we'll call it, okay? They say for the best cut quality or ideal cut quality, this is what you want to cut it at. That doesn't actually mean the best cut quality, to be clear. People think they see that book setting and they're like, well, it says
it's going to be perfect every time.
Yeah, I should cut it at 80 inches a minute. That's what they said. Well, that's to get the best consumable life. Sometimes you're going to give up consumable life
for better quality.
It's like a rotational bit in a router. Sometimes you spin the bit faster, and yeah, you burn the bit up a little bit, but your cut quality is a little bit better.
It's a give and take.
It's a give and take. You got to choose what's right for you, speed or cut quality. You choose. So in some cases, you might speed it up, and you get a little better finish. Some cases, you might slow it down, get a little better finish. In some cases, you're trying to go for less dross, and dross is the amount of slag or material hanging off the material, off of the product that you're cutting.
Right.
A lot of times we look for what's called a flakeable dross, and that's basically when you're done, you should be able to really hit it real quick, and it flakes off or it brushes off fairly easy. Versus if you're slowing the cut down, you might end up with a hardened dross, which then requires a little bit more of a grinding application, and that's where easy sanders come in, and time savers and things like that, where you're gonna try to assist the operator with removing that debris. And we have some videos on our website that will actually show that, but that's a give and take.
Gotcha.
Am I looking for the finished quality, or am I looking for the cleanup process?
So you're going to give and take with this. To get your desired results, you might go through consumables faster. You might have to slow the speed up. You might have to slow it down, but you're going to get your desired result, right?
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And and kind of going back to, are all the cutters the same? No. I mean, you can put my cutter, or my machine, excuse me, you can put a cutter on my machine. You can go put it on, a bolt together, designed machine. And just because it's a 45 doesn't mean that machine's going to be capable of using that 45. Here at ShopSabre, part of what we do is engineer the machines so that the cutter is the weak point. I know that sounds weird, but I want the cutter to be just like the router bit. I want the cutter to let you down before the machine lets you down. And the reality is, there's only so much you can do with a flame. I mean, let's be honest, you can only control a flame so much, and that's the levels of standard definition versus high definition, which again, we'll touch on that here shortly. But the reality of what you're getting is the accuracy in the flame. And high definition essentially is just a higher quality cutter. It's going to give you're going to spend more. I mean, let's be honest.
They're not cheap.
They're not. I mean, you're going to spend $80,000 to $120,000 for a high definition plasma machine.
Yeah, seems right.
And the reality is, though, what are you getting? Well, you're going to gain cut quality. When you start looking at plasma, generally speaking, you're going to get an 8-degree bevel or larger, depending on the thickness of material, with air plasma. And air plasma is considered compressed air. That's what they consider. As you get into the high definition cutters, you end up with what's called gas councils. And whether they're manual or auto, you have the ability to mix gases. Oxygen and other. Go ahead, Jesse.
So we
put your hand up there for me.
Well, you don't let me talk ever. You just keep going. So you're telling me I can mix different gases to achieve different cut qualities?
Exactly. And the reality is when you add a oxygen assist, for example, you're going to increase the heat. The burn is better. Oxygen makes fire stronger.
Right.
That's why you try to take oxygen. Stop, drop, and roll.
Stop, drop, and roll.
Take
Put those flames
away.
out.
Put the flames out. But the reality is by adding oxygen, you increase the burn. You get a better burn, and therefore higher heat. Therefore, you end up with a cleaner cut because it can do more. It allows you to cut thicker materials. It gives you a better finish. You can affect finishes by adding certain things like F5 gas as an example, or if we add nitrogen. There's certain applications like stainless steel and things where you're going to add assist gas to get a better finish. And by doing that, the high definition cutters can get down to about a 3-degree bevel. Now in some cases, I've got guys that say, I can get less than 3 degrees. Well, you know what? That's awesome, and I'm happy to hear that. But I'm not going to tell you you're going to get less than 3 degrees, because then everybody's calling me and saying, I got only 3 degrees.
Right, they're going to hold us to it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to be honest with you. I can't control the flame. I can't sit there and do that for you, but I can help you tune it. We can try to get it in. And, that's the difference in what plasma does for you is it gives you a tool that gives you a very clean, crisp cut in a lot of applications at a fraction of the cost. I mean, even let's look at a high definition cutter. At $80,000, $90,000, $100,000, it's still cheaper than a water jet.
Yeah, it is.
And it's still cheaper than a laser.
Probably less headache too.
Exactly. There's still less consumables. And in most applications, it's still going to give you better tolerances and cut quality than you ever are going to need to achieve. I mean, there are certain applications where a laser makes sense. Tight tolerance, holes, things like that. I mean,
yep.
Let's talk about tolerances for a second here. As we get into tolerances, there's a limitation in plasma, is there not, Jesse?
There is.
Yeah. So as you get down to like hole sizes, for example, Jesse, let's touch on that.
Brandon, yeah, the rule of thumb typically on this is a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you have a 1/2-inch sheet of material, you're going to want to stick to a 1/2-inch sized hole or larger. The smallest hole you typically can cut with a plasma is a 1/4 inch. That's usually the smallest you want to go with hole cutting.
So as you get into that, let's touch on that real quick. Well, I'm only cutting really thin. I've got 26 gauge. Why can't I cut a 1/4 inch hole?
It's too thin.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is you're still going to blow the material apart if you start doing, trying to get in the same spot with the amount of heat that you could be doing. But the reality is your kerf. I mean, the flame is only so small. A 1/4 inch hole, you're going to struggle to get anything smaller than that, simply because it's still using arc. Naturally, that arc is going to want to wander a little bit, and therefore your hole becomes not a hole anymore. It kind of becomes a blob, if you will.
Or an egg.
Yeah.
Oblong.
So it's not what you think it is. And, let's touch back on that 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
1-to-1's great. But, 1.5 to 1 gets you realistically the best cut quality you're going to typically see. Most people find that if you have a 1.5 to 1 hold size to material. So, again, if you can go about, 1.5 times the thickness of the material on your hole size, you'll get a beautiful cut. But 1-to-1 on a ShopSabre, I know we can get a really nice cut still on a 1-to-1.
Yeah.
But again, that relates back to the technology. As we kind of take a step back here in the tolerances and what we're talking about, the machine, that's why it's not all the same. You can use the same cutter on 2 different machines and get 2 different results because it comes back to that plasma cutter has one set rule of settings, right? You say cut it at 80 inches a minute, but 80 inches a minute is going to look different on 2 different machines. When you start looking at acceleration rates, for example,
right.
Accelerating and decelerating, that makes a difference on what speed are you really cutting at. I told it to go 80 inches a minute, but it took half the table to get up to 80 inches a minute. So am I really getting up to 80? Probably not.
Probably not.
So I'm not really cutting at the recommended settings. So therefore, you're going to get a different cut quality. So when you start looking at CNC plasma, the next thing you have to look at is really what is it constructed of? And as we look at construction, there's a lot of machines that are out there that are built out of aluminum. Aluminum is a cost-effective way to build a machine for a lot of people. And I know it sounds weird, right? Aluminum is more expensive is what people think. But you can use lighter weight, components. As you start looking at aluminum, it's light. Therefore, your gantry is not very big. A lot of times people use an extrusion because then they don't have to mill anything. They're just bolting things together, But the reality of what you get out of that is you also have a lighter machine. So therefore, you have smaller motors, stepper motors, servo motors, whatever it is. They're lower torque motors. So your acceleration and deceleration is less. And therefore, even though you told it to go 80 inches a minute, it didn't get to 80. So now you're not cutting at the speeds you think you're cutting at. And that's all related to heat. Let's talk a little bit about the heat here. Let's explain heat for a second.
Yeah. Did you know the sun is 27 million degrees Fahrenheit?
Well, that's an interesting fact of the day. But
you said you wanted to talk about heat.
That's true. I did. But I thought we'd talk a little bit more about,
actual heat?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got
Let's
you.
bring the heat.
That's not heat. You want heat?
Bring the heat.
The heat that you achieve with a plasma flame can be upwards of 45,000 degrees.
Wow.
Generally it's going to range, around 45,000 or 25,000 degrees for you Celsius guys out there.
Yeah, Europeans.
Yep. But it's regardless, it's, significantly higher than the boiling point of water.
Just a little.
Yeah, just a little bit, right? So
imagine cooking a hot dog in that.
Man, it wouldn't take long.
Not at all. You wouldn't
if
have a
anybody
hot
has
dog?
cooked a hot dog on your plasma table, please email that to ShopSabre. I'd like to see it.
We're going to get inundated with guys making
I
hot
hope we
dogs
do.
on their plasma
I hope
machines.
we do. I want to see a hot dog. Don't burn your... we interrupt this podcast to let you know that we are not liable for any bad decisions you make by trying to cook a hot dog.
I agree with that.
We're now back to the show. Anyways, it's significantly higher than boiling water, as I mentioned. It's realistically, let's be honest, it's so hot and there's such a bright light that honestly staring at the flame is bad for you. It's going to hurt your eyes.
I know it hurts my eyes every time, but I still look at it when I walk by.
Don't do that.
I can't help it.
You're not supposed to look at the sun either.
I know, but I still do that too.
Well, you should stop. You're going to go blind. But the reality here is there's a lot of heat associated with this. Well, what does heat do?
Heat rises.
It rises. So good news. You just strapped your 45,000 degree lightsaber onto this aluminum gantry.
Sounds legit.
Well, that's cool because aluminum has a melting point of roughly 1,266.66 degrees, roughly.
That doesn't sound very rough. That
So
sounds very
roughly,
accurate.
Roughly, which is significantly lower point than what you get from steel. And to stop everybody who out there right now is going, well, you're not going to melt the gantry. You're right. You're not going to melt the gantry. You are 100% correct. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is heat's going to rise though. And that gantry is going to get hot.
They call that heat soak, right?
Correct. And as it heat soaks, the gantry is going to change. Even if you mill the surface, my favorite, there's some machines out there that we mill our aluminum gantry. Cool. But you know what that means? That doesn't mean anything because the heat just rose and it changed your milling on that because you have half the material to work with. No, they're serious. You're starting with a good point. It's still good that they milled it. I'm not saying anything wrong with that. You should always mill your gantries. You'll get a better cut quality. But the accuracy of that machine is going to change. It's going to change with heat soak. So the more the machine heats up and cools down, the gantry is going to change a little bit. And
So your gantry will start to warp.
yeah, it'll start to warp, to a degree. And it's not, I'm not talking that you're going to stare at this thing and you can see it's a 1/4 inch out. It's not. It's thousandths, right?
Yeah, so you're not going to see sag. You're not going to see the gantry drooping.
Yeah, exactly. It's not gonna look like that, but it will affect the cut quality. You will see quality issues there, and that's why when you look at all professional grade machines out there, most professional grade machines, I want to say all because I can't think off the top of my head right now on the spot of a machine that uses an aluminum gantry that would be considered an industrial machine, but they might be out there. So don't quote me on that one exactly, but I know that the majority of industrial machines out there use steel gantries. It's steel bridges, cast bridges, whatever it is, heavy duty, materials. So that way, as that heat rises, it can take the heat, further and kind of dissipate it a little easier. But also, the other advantage where people lose track of why does the heavier materials matter, I can raise that bridge up. I can get the bridge a little bit further away from the material because I get less deflection with a heavier material.
So we have a higher gantry height.
So higher gantry height, so as you start looking at, a lot of these machines are, they're low riders. They're just barely. Exactly. But the reality is they're riding right on the top of the surface. And it's because they're trying to keep the rigidity in the machine because they're using lighter weight materials. The disadvantage of that is A, more heat soak. B, you're going to end up having, less clearance to work with. If I want to take let's say a tube, throw it up there and I want to cut a shape out of a tube. If I have a low gantry, I'm going to have a harder time getting that up on the material.
That's what I was just thinking. My first thing went to Jeep guys.
Yeah.
Can't make a Jeep bumper with that low gantry.
Correct, exactly. There's so many things. Custom truck guys. There's so many applications. Skidsters and tractors, and there's applications where you need clearance. I don't care who you are. You're going to need them eventually. And having that ability. There's a gentleman that posts on our Facebook and our Instagram a lot. That Wolfgang is his name, which is just an awesome name.
I love that name,
Wolfgang. But he's an awesome guy. We post stuff for him all the time. Go out, check out our Instagram. You'll see a bunch of stuff he does. But he posted just recently, he was cutting some tubes on his table, and he's right up on the machine. He shows it cutting it. To me, that's so cool because he used his plasma machine to still notch tubes.
Can I get ahead of myself a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead. Get ahead of yourself.
Combo table.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Right? Want that gantry height.
He wasn't lying when he said he loves that combo
table. I know.
Table.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah, but the combo table, he's right. Again, clearance. Putting a bit in the router and being able to route some things, it gives you more ability there. Let's touch on pipe cutting, right?
Right.
Put a pipe cutter up there. More gantry clearance, larger pipes, right? So there's some things you can do there with our machines because of the higher gantry clearance. Well, the only time you can get that higher gantry clearance is increase the rigidity, so you get less deflection. So as we start explaining weight and deflection for a second here, adding weight to the machine still matters. I know there's a lot of guys out there say, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not putting any force against the machine. I'm not going to route. Jesse, stop talking about your combo table. I don't care.
I'm not going to stop talking about the combo table,
He's
guys.
not going to do it, I promise you. But the reality is in engineering, deflection is a degree to which a structural element is displaced under load. So basically it's referred to in either an angle or a distance or whatever it might be, but you're going to have a degree of deflection. Now, even if you don't apply a load per se, you're not applying a routed force against the gantry, it still has inertia. As the machine moves and stops, it's changing direction, and inertia is something you have to think about. So the heavier the gantry is, there's more inertia there.
Right.
Well, that is how do we overcome that? Well, that's where it goes back to my initial, where this whole thing started, motors. We put bigger motors on our machine to help with the inertia. It also helps with the acceleration because now we have more torque. So going back to the initial statement of I'm cutting at 80 inches a minute on both machines, you're really not. The ShopSabre can allow itself to accelerate and decelerate sooner or later. So you can accelerate faster out of the corner and wait longer before you have to decelerate going into the corner. Therefore, you end up with a cleaner, crisper cut. You end up with tighter tolerances. There's some stuff, if you look at like Lee Roadhamel, right? That guy cuts some stuff that is some really tight tolerances.
Mind-blowing stuff.
And that's stuff that you can find that with these plasma machines, we can do things that our competition can't do. Ask Lee. Lee owned a competitor's machine. He'll gladly talk to you about it. We're going to have Lee on an episode in the future here. But really, he's tried it. He was the guy who bought a competitor's machine and actually returned it because he was not getting the cut quality that he needed. And, honestly, they kept saying it was him. Oh, it's you. You don't know how to use the plasma table. You don't know what you're doing. He bought our machine and cut the parts that they said he couldn't do. So I don't think it was him, right?
Goes back to the quality of the overall machine.
Yep, it goes back to all plasma cutters are not made equally. You know, you can put one cutter on one machine and put the exact same cutter on another machine and get a different quality of cut.
Totally different outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of goes back to like a router bit. You know, if you used, a cheap bit versus a good bit, they're both bits, right?
Right.
They're still going to produce different finishes. It's the same sort of thing. So, there are some things to think about in that side of it. But,
with your motors, don't you get more acceleration, more speed? But doesn't that also help with heat transfer? You don't get as much heat transferring to your materials if you're moving faster?
Exactly. If you can pick up a little speed, it will help you. You're still going to have limitations to how fast you can go. So there are some limits there. And again, that goes back to high definition cutting. Why high definition matters? Well, you can move a little bit faster because you have more to work with. I mean, you're talking about, as an example, you have the PowerMax series. You might have a 85 amp system. Well, if you look at like an XPR unit by Hypertherm, it starts at 170. It's 170 amps. Yeah. So I mean, then they go up to the 300, and you can get into thermodynamics. They have their ultra cuts, and they go up to like the ultra cut 800. So there's so many things that you can apply more power to go faster. So there are applications where you can do things a little bit faster. And in fact, ShopSabre has a video on its website, which I encourage everybody to check out later on when they have time, about plasma cutting and showing speed. We have a speed video out there. In fact, I think Garrett's going to post that video online here shortly after the show. And that way you can see speed and performance from a ShopSabre. I mean, it shows some really cool stuff that we did in, I think 26 gauge is what we did then. So for you guys who are cutting thin stuff, it's a really cool option, or capability, I should say, not option. It's a capability that our machine brings to you, that to be able to cut the thinner stuff. A lot of machines struggle on thin stuff. Let's touch on that real quick.
How many machines out there can cut that 26 gauge? I mean, that's really thin material, like you said.
Yeah.
For us to be able to cut that, I think there's a lot of technology that goes into it other than just the cutter, right?
Exactly. And I think that's something that gets missed a lot in plasmas. Everybody looks at these thick cuts these machines are doing. Every machine manufacturer shows how thick a material they can cut.
Everybody can cut thick.
You know why? Because they have to go slow. Inertia doesn't matter. The rigidity of the machine doesn't matter because you're going so slow, you're limited by the cutter there. Show me cutting thin stuff. Show me cutting 26 gauge, because that's where heat's going to really show itself. If you can't get that cutter moving and you can't get the heat to stay away from the material fast enough, you're going to blow the machine, blow the parts out, and the machine's going to just fail the entire test. I mean,
you're going to ruin that sheet.
Yeah, it's a test we did with Hypertherm. Hypertherm, when they came in and was doing some stuff here, we work with Hypertherm a lot. We're pretty proud of that. We're a really good, vendor of theirs, but also they're a really good, partner of ours. And the reality is, when we were doing a test, they handed us a file that was 26 gauge test. They wanted us to show thin stuff, not thick. Because again, as you get in and out of a corner, try making a point on 26 gauge material. You don't have long before that point's not a point.
Right.
So you got to get moving. And so the acceleration, deceleration rate on the machine will determine that stuff. So that's stuff that we are really proud to be able to show people. So it's something worth, checking out. That's something that will make a big difference. But, one of the things that, kind of comes back to is, why do some machines cost way more than others, Jesse?
Let's be real. Some of them you're paying for a name.
There is that. There are certain things that, I can't tell you why they cost more. They cost more simply because they can. They can charge you more because you're going to buy their name and they can get away with it. But, let's talk about some of the cheaper machines, right? There are machines out there that are cheap. And to be honest with you, they're cheap because of one reason.
China.
Yeah, they're China, right? You can bring in Chinese machines. There's another reason why cheap machines exist. Even American-made machines, right? There's guys out there welding stuff in their garage and selling them to you on the internet, and whatever, it might be. But let's talk about, again, steel versus aluminum construction.
A lot of those cheaper ones are going to be extruded metals, or it's going to be angle iron bolted together. I think that's where you save some costs as well.
Exactly. Or they're extruded aluminum and then they have steel bolted on top of it, or metal bolted on top of it to make it look like it's steel.
That makes sense. Why not just make it out of steel to begin with?
Exactly. I mean, there's so many ways that people cut corners. But again, why'd they make it out of aluminum? Because it's cheaper for them to buy motors then. They can put smaller motors on. They can get away with using a stepper motor versus a servo. Stepper motors are 4 times slower than a servo motor on acceleration. But if the material is lighter, you can use gear ratio and get away with it.
It sounds like a lot of places to cut corners.
Exactly. And rather than cutting corners, you just build it right. And that's the difference is, a lot of these steel frame machines, you look at all the big machines, they're always steel frames, steel gantries, go there. But then you start looking at, the proper fabrication versus garage fabrication. Don't get me wrong. There's some of you guys out there that are probably the best fabricators ever that came out of your garage. ShopSabre started there too, right?
Yep.
ShopSabre started out of its garage too. But there's a very different world of fabricating something in your garage versus using a proper fabrication process. When you start looking at, heat treating material, being able to stress relief metal and being able to mill the frames. And there's things that we can do because of technology that we own now that give the machine an advantage. I'll tell you right now, if you have a machine that was built by us, 20 years ago, it's not the same technology that we're using today.
Simply, we made a couple changes since then, haven't we?
We've had some upgrades. So as you start looking at that, you'll find that ShopSabre has a lot we've done to improve the machines over the years. So if you go and look at a machine that's just starting out, they're at that time where ShopSabre was 20 years ago. These companies that are entry level, we hear some money guys like, well, I want to support the local guy. Nothing wrong with that. Guess what? ShopSabre's local still too.
Thank you.
We're still American made. So you can still support the local guy, but you also got to support yourself, right? Get yourself a product you can depend on. So there are, if you're using this for production, ShopSabre is a great solution for your needs. Talk about testing for a second there, right? We test every machine.
Every machine before it leaves this facility.
And a part of that is we use tools that our competitors don't even own.
Right.
Finite element analysis. Again, FIFA.
FIFA.
We talked about that in a previous episode, right?
Yep.
FEA software. It's a great way to test, machines and components. Being able to understand it. When we test things electronically using FEA, it allows us to develop the machine electronically before we've ever actually built something. So by the time we build it, we know it's right.
It's the proper legwork.
Correct.
Right?
We've done things ahead of time. We know what size bearings we're going to need to use for the loads we're going to apply. We know the size of the steel. We know the thickness of the steel. We know where things need to go and when to do it, right? When you look at a lot of these machines, you see 4-post leg design machines. You see really no structural integrity in the center of these machines. Well, you stick a big plate up on the machine and the machine is going to deflect because there's nothing supporting it.
Right.
ShopSabre uses steel legs all the way around the machine. They're all welded. They're not bolted on. Bolts come loose. Welds don't,
Right.
So you're going to have a stronger structural integrity.
You
Wow.
need to take a drink of water, bud.
Man, I'm
take a
losing it
sip.
there.
You're stuttering there.
I'm sorry, I seem to have something stuck in my...
Somebody get him some water, please.
You look at some of these lighter machines for sure, and it looks like you could pick them up with 2 guys and carry them around the shop, right? There's no size to them. There's no weight to them. They don't look quality. You can tell they were just built cutting corners. There's no way you're picking up a sidekick.
And I think that's funny that you say that story. There was a time when it was like 10 years ago, and we used to work with a dealer. There was a guy that used to sell machines, and he sold a competitor's brand. And one of his customers called us up and said they wanted to buy a machine. And the dealer called me and said, I'd love to still be involved. I'd love to go help my customer. And I said, we have absolutely no problem with you being involved with your customer, but we're still going to support our customers as well. And he said, that's great. He said, the customer wants to pay for on-site to have you guys come and install this machine. And I said, well, there's not much for me to install. It shows up fully assembled. It's already tested. Literally just got to plug it in. He goes, oh, that's great. He goes, well, they still want you there. And I said, well, if they want to spend their money, we'll gladly help them spend it. But they did. They ended up buying us, our time to come out there. And we came out. And as I said, the machine's fully assembled. But you know why they had me come out there?
Why?
They wanted us to remove their old machine.
What?
Yep. They needed people's help carrying the old machine out. And as we brought their old machine out, so I walked in and there's a machine sitting in the shop. And the guys looked at each other and said, well, we can't install the machine because there's a machine there. The dealer looked at us and said, you grab one side of the gantry, I'll grab the other. And we grabbed each side of the gantry, we picked that machine up and walked right out of the room
You
with
picked
it.
the machine up.
Right up. Just carried the gantry right away and then drug the machine out after it. So
Got you.
yeah, it was one of those things where it was like, wow, these machines really are lighter than I thought they were. So, with our machine, we had to have forklifts in place. Like you weren't lifting it, it was a couple thousand pounds. And these machines that this company was running before were a lot lighter and they were able to just carry them out of the shop.
Yeah, I was kidding about picking them up.
Yeah, no, they really did. So it's funny that you brought that up because it just reminded me of that story. But nevertheless, when you talk about the materials themselves, that's a big part of it. Thicker materials on the ShopSabre. You have steel gantries, steel uprights, steel bases, tubes. They're actual tubes. A lot of tubes. They're not, just a few tubes here and then a bunch of.
Well, even down to our slats. Our slats are steel. I had a guy on the phone ask me if our slats were made out of aluminum.
Yep.
Someone out there's putting aluminum in for slats.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that. And that's the advantage to what we're doing. We're not trying to cut corners there. Let's talk about the wiring. A lot of people don't think of, wires are wires, right, Jesse?
No, that's not true.
Yeah, no. There's literally companies out there that use the same, and I go back to Radio Shack. I don't know why. Do they even exist anymore?
I don't think so.
Well, if Radio Shack exists,
Circuit City?
Shout out to Radio Shack if they're still around. But the reality is like you can go down to your local stores and buy wiring. That's not continuous flex robotics wiring in most cases. That's cheap wiring. And so you buy the wire and it works great for running your speaker system because your speakers aren't moving.
Right.
The CNC machine is moving back and forth in all axes. Over time, those wires can break. And as those wires break, you have now developed what I like to call as a ghost. Because you don't know where it is and what's going on with it.
Have fun finding that.
But you got to find it. Because guess what? Your machine's not going to run right until that's fixed.
Could you imagine a guy like me trying to find that wire?
Yeah, I couldn't. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to diagnose that. So that's why ShopSabre uses continuous flex robotics wiring. It's an upgraded wiring. It costs more money. I promise you. It's more money than I want to spend on wiring even. But I value my time and the customer's time more than chasing a ghost down. So even though it probably breaks outside of warranty and it's probably not my problem, they're still going to call us because guess what? Free lifetime tech support.
So you're spending the money up front to prevent the headache later.
Because I still got to diagnose it later, even if it's not my problem, quote unquote, right? Somebody else's problem, right? It's out of warranty. No, it's still our problem because we don't have it's not my problem. We take care of our customers.
That's not in the warranty?
Yeah, no, we don't have anything in the warranty that says not my problem.
Okay.
That's what's the beauty about that. But then you talk about the controllers and the software. It goes along the line with it. There's a lot of guys that buy cheap controllers so they can just put them in a laptop. These laptop controllers, they're downloading programs. Think about that. A laptop has no controller in it. If you're plugging a laptop into your CNC machine, you're not using anything other than software. There's no controller there. You're using a computer that was probably designed for some guy to go, type Word documents or
gaming
or whatever the case may be, high schoolers, that's what it's designed for. It's not designed to run a CNC. No laptop manufacturer out there is like, good news, today we're going to develop the laptop that is for that CNC user. They're not doing that. So there's no hardware in there to run a CNC machine. With ShopSabre, you're getting a standalone control hardware. You get stuff that's actually designed for a CNC machine, and therefore the controller costs money. That costs something. The competitors are giving you a laptop, so they buy the laptop, but they're downloading software on it. It's cheap. When you start looking at CAD CAM software, a lot of these companies have their own, branded software, right?
How does that work? Can I use their software on our machine then?
No.
So if I have files from that company, I can't use it on my machine.
Well, there's ways around that. We can sometimes do that. I mean, it depends if you have them in a DXF file. But let's touch on that. Real quick.
Yeah.
They're doing that because they don't have to buy anything. They don't have to buy a software, but they also rope you in, like you just said. Now all their stuff's in their own code. Guess
so
what?
You have to come back.
You have to go back to them, even, regardless if you like them or not, or you're starting over. So rather than doing that, you use a company like ShopSabre who's open software. With us, we use anything. Our machines run on standard G code, so anything that can put out standard G code can work with our machine. But the reality is when you start looking at CAD CAM software, ShopSabre uses ProNest LT on our standard machines.
Pretty awesome software.
Hypertherm ProNest, I don't think it gets much better than that. They are the leader.
For free?
For the first year, we give you the full year of their software, and then it's your choice if you want to continue that. So the beauty is you're not even roped into it. If you don't want it or don't like it, you can use other software.
Nice.
Move on. En route fabrication, that's another one we work
So you don't handcuff me.
Yep. En route fabrication, lifetime license. You can own that one. If you want that instead, we'll give you that.
Yeah, we offer that free too.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different softwares you can use with these machines, but that's the beauty of this. You're not stuck. When you go to the competition and they have their own software, it's proprietary. What happens when they discontinue that software?
What do I do? I'm gonna have to order a new machine.
What happens if you're not getting the service from them that you need? Can anybody else take care of you?
No. Who's gonna help me?
Exactly.
I'm stuck.
With Hypertherm, with En route, with any of those, they service their own software. Because guess what? If they're not selling software, they're going out of business. That's what their job is to sell that stuff. ShopSabre, our job is to sell CNC machines. We're gonna focus the best we can on building you the best machine possible. We let the software experts build the software. These companies who want to be the all-in-one, it's just because they want to be greedy. It's less money out the door and more coming in the door. It's greed. And the problem is greed catches up to somebody somewhere. You're going to cut corners somewhere. And with ShopSabre, we don't cut those corners. So yeah, it costs a little bit more money on the upfront side, right? Than some of these cheaper machines. I promise you on the back end, the value is there. That's the difference. You get more. And when you explain I'm cheap, right?
Right.
I'm cheap. Well, being cheap is kind of expensive.
Right. We said it last week, right? I threw the quote out there. It takes a very rich man to buy a cheap machine.
Exactly. And the reason for that is because as software becomes discontinued, you're buying something. As the machine breaks, you have to buy stuff. You have to fix things. It costs you money over time. Spend a little bit more money up front, and now you have lifetime tech support, lifetime training. You have so much more from the company side of it. But let's touch on that because longevity-wise, right? If a machine lasts you 10 years versus a machine that lasts you 2 years, did it really cost you more money?
You're spending more money.
Yeah, you're spending more money with the cheaper machine.
Yeah, you are.
And then you talk about, what you get for your money. Let's talk about real quick tech support. You get these entry level.
These guys
machines.
are my favorite, Brandon.
Yeah, but you start talking about the tech support guys are awesome. But when you start talking about tech support, we have a group of people here that their entire job revolves around you calling them. Like literally, if you don't call them, the phone doesn't ring. I don't need tech guys, right?
Right.
So the reality is their whole job is to make sure that you're taken care of and that things that happen, you call them about. Like they want you to call them. Like they want to help you. That's their jobs. There's companies out there that literally you're getting the cell phone number for the guy who started the product.
I've heard that.
Which, is great, right? When he has
sure
20 customers. But what happens when he has 2,000 customers?
Or what happens when he retires?
What happens if he gets sick?
I'm not going to say that.
You're worried about if he gets hit by that mysterious bus that drives
Yeah.
around running people over?
Yeah.
I just got ran over by a bus.
I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, I'll say it. I don't care because everybody talks about the bus. Like, oh, what if he gets ran over a bus? What is with the bus? Like, whoever this bus driver is that drives around running people over, he needs to be taken away. Like, we can't have this guy driving around and running people over all the time. But the reality is, if this really, this bus driver, this guy, I tell you, if he gets him, think about it though. What are you gonna do? Like, oh, the cell phone doesn't work anymore. It's under the bus.
Time to find a new machine.
Right? I hate to joke that way, but the reality is that's the stuff you have to think about.
Right.
Like, you're investing in somebody's product and you're hoping that they are in good health. They don't want to go on vacation because heaven forbid they want to go on vacation, or they just decide they're not going to answer the phone. Whatever's going on in their personal life, right?
Right.
You're dependent on them for support. Otherwise,
thank you.
Good luck. So long. With ShopSabre, we have a group of guys here. Let's talk about Ben. Ben's awesome.
There's no one in the industry that's better than Ben.
There's no Ben in the industry besides Ben. I mean, I'll honestly say, like, if you're gonna buy a ShopSabre, you get Ben. Like, sell you on that alone. Ben is awesome. He's forgotten more than most people will ever learn. But the guy is there to take care of you. But the beauty is, if he has to take a vacation, we have other guys in the department as well. There's other guys that can jump in and take care of you and help you. And I mean, even Logan, for example, Logan teaches classes on this. Literally, we have a guy here in our facility that teaches classes on CAD CAM software.
Right.
Do you want to buy a machine from somebody who can teach you how to run the CAD CAM software?
Absolutely.
I certainly do, because I don't know what I don't know, right?
Right.
The scariest thing is to learn something you can't learn, right?
Absolutely.
You have a guy here that's going to help you. We have a parts library. There's already predetermined stuff in there. Or in my case, Google. Amy says she wants the sign with the tractor. Brandon went to Google and said, tractor.
Found a picture.
Oh, yes, I meant tractor. Sorry.
Awesome second grade spelling.
Yeah, I had to click that, did you mean, right? But I got it. We're there. I got the tractor.
Trickter.
Trickter. Bought me a trickter. But yeah, got the tractor in there, and I cut it out because I have Google. That's the beauty of our software. So many things you can do because of that. So, as you start looking at the entire episode that we've talked about today, like, the difference in plasma machines is quite a bit. I mean, plasma doesn't seem like a lot there, right? But there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of things that when you start looking at a machine, from the frames to the gantries to the motors to the tech support to the software to I can keep going, and I'm starting to run out of breath. So somebody help me.
Another drink of water. Yeah, take another drink of water there for sure. But as Brandon said, there's a lot of things that go into these machines. They're not all created equal. It doesn't come down to just the torch either. The machine itself, the build, the quality, not all machines are created the same.
And I hope that helps you guys a lot. I mean, my voice is... It's hung on. I can't believe it. It made it through the whole episode.
Racing before podcast day.
I can't do that. It's killing us here. But the reality is like I said, I hope we taught you something today. We're gonna talk next week a little bit about. I believe we're gonna talk about frame technology as next week's episode. We're gonna talk a little bit about frames and the different technologies that go into it. And
sounds heavy.
I think I lied. It's not frame technology next week.
It's Router Bob.
It's Router Bob week next week.
Router Bob will be live with us next week.
Router Bob live next week.
Yes.
So, yeah, we're going to have Bob on the podcast next week. So make sure you tune in for that. Frames is coming up.
No one's going to want to listen to us again once Bob's on.
Yeah, it's true. Bob's going to be on, and then we're going to say, oh, I'm not going to get to talk.
I know. You guys are in luck. You're not going to have to hear him for a whole episode.
I'm pretty sad about that. I've already got a little tear here. So, you know what? I'm Brandon.
I'm Jesse.
Thanks for talking shop with ShopSabre.